So I think the first practice that I recommend to people is to sit down alone with a piece of paper and a pen in a place that you are highly inspired. So for me, I've mentioned I'm in Jacksonville, Florida. I live just a few minutes from the ocean. To me, it's to go walk out to the ocean and sit there alone, no phone, no music. It's just me, a pen, and some paper. And I think about it. Okay, like what is
waves?
Yeah, that's it, man. You know, like, but like I feel inspired in that area, and I at that moment I'm like, okay, what am I really good at? What do I uniquely add to the world? Like, what's my value add? How do I serve people in the strongest, most powerful way that I possibly can? And figure out what that genius is, or that superpower, right? Like, how do I really figure this out? And the thing is, we all really know this. We just have to dig deep enough to find it sometimes. And if anyone's like, I just don't even know where that is, it's a combination of something that you are far better than most people at and something that you thoroughly enjoy.
Heroes are an inspiring group of people. Every one of them, from the larger-than-life comic book heroes you see on the big silver screen, to everyday heroes that let us live the privileged lives we do. Every hero has a story to tell. From the doctor saving lives at your local hospital, to the war veteran down the street who risked his life for our freedom, to the police officers and the firefighters who risked their safety to ensure ours. Every hero is special and every story worth telling. But there is one class of heroes that I think is often ignored. The entrepreneur, the creator, the producer. The ones who look at the problems in this world and think to themselves, you know what? I can fix that. I can help people. I can make a difference. Then they go out and do exactly that by creating a new product or introducing a new service. Some go on to change the world. Others make a world of difference to their customers. Welcome to The Hero Show. Join us as we pull back the masks on the world's finest heropreneurs and learn the secrets to their powers, their success, and their influence, so you can use those secrets to attract more sales, make more money, and experience more freedom in your business. I'm your host, Richard Matthews, and we are on in 3, 2, 1.
Hello and welcome back to The Hero Show. My name is Richard Matthews, and I have the pleasure of having Alex Sanfilippo on the line. Did I pronounce that right?
Not quite. Sanfilippo.
Sanfilippo. There we go. Did I get it right that time?
Sanfilippo. Yeah, you got it. Yeah.
There we go. Got it right the second time. Awesome. Glad to have you here. So for those of you guys who have been following along with our journeys, we're up in South Carolina for the holidays this year, moving a little bit from our COVID stuckedness in Florida. I hear you're in Florida, right? Is that where you're at now?
Yeah, Jacksonville, Florida, just pretty close to the ocean. Beautiful place. It's nice weather. I think I've got a little bit warmer weather than you do now.
Yeah. So my favorite thing about Jacksonville, we stayed there a couple of years ago for Thanksgiving. And we were staying in a little tiny RV park, like in the middle of the city. And I can't remember exactly what it was called, but we drive into the RV park, and this little old guy who owns it, and like really old, super nice guy, but was probably like pushing 115 is what it looked like. And he's like giving us the tour and taking us around the thing, and he gives us the map. And he's like, okay, so over here is like there's a walking path that goes down to the river. And he's like, your kids can swim there. There's a little dock. There's all sorts of swimming. And he's like, just so you know, there's alligators in there. But if you avoid the alligators, it's a great place to swim. And I was just like,
you're like, what?
Like, wait, swim with alligators? Who does that?
Florida man does it. Welcome. You met Florida man that day. Congratulations.
Yeah, I met Florida man. Florida man swims with alligators. And I was like, yeah, that's not happening. So, maybe it's something they used to do back in the day. So who knows?
I've never done that, but it doesn't surprise me. We hear stories about that all the time. My wife sent me a video the other day, and it was the headline of it was Florida man jumps in water to save dog from alligator. And literally this guy, there was a video.
Saw that video.
Yeah, he jumped in the water and he has a cigar in his mouth. He doesn't take the cigar out of his mouth. He grabs the alligator, opens it up, pulls the dog out, throws the dog to shore, and then throws the alligator and walks out. And
you're like that.
I'm like
that
what?
Guy.
I'm like, this is where I live. Like, but I want the listeners to kind of get a different perspective of me. I live close to the ocean, and we're a little bit different the closer to the water you get. So I'm more of like a beach guy than like a swamp Florida man. All right.
Yeah. So we definitely because we went all up and down the West Coast and the East Coast, and then went all through the center of Florida, and very different cultures.
Yes.
Despite only being like an hour apart.
Yes, very different. That's the only way you can describe it, is very different.
Yeah. But anyways, Florida was super cool. Loved staying there. If you're going to get stuck somewhere for all of COVID, Florida's a great place to do it.
It's not a bad spot.
Awesome. So let me go ahead and introduce you for our guests who don't know who you are, not our guests, our audience who doesn't know who you are. So Alex is the host of the Top 20 Entrepreneurship podcast, Creating a Brand, which can be found at creatingabrand.com. You're also the founder of PodMatch.com, which is a free service that automatically matches podcast guests and hosts together for interviews, which I believe our team actually might use to book some of our guests, which is pretty cool. So what I want to do to start off with, Alex, is why don't you tell me a little bit about what your business is like now, what you're known for, like who you actually serve, how you drive revenue, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, sure. So creating a brand on that side of things, which is my podcast, it's really top of funnel, which is usually what podcasts are, right? So it's really my free educational element. And I started it because I saw that there was people who were looking for that type of content. So it's more of like a masterclass style podcast. So I'll bring a guest on, a subject matter expert, and we'll just dive deep into that topic. And there's not a lot of conversation back and forth. It's more so like, hey, give us the 5 ways to do this or 5 points for that. And that's really the focus of it. And it's done really well. I've been really fortunate to just have a great audience for that podcast and just some amazing guests come on. So that's been really fun. And what kind of came out of that was PodMatch, because I realized it is kind of difficult to find guests sometimes. I remember when I first got started, Richard, you can probably remember this too. When you first got started, it's like, will you be a guest? People were like, what? Why? Like, and who are you? And why? How'd you get my email address? Like all these different things. And so I just kind of thought there needed to be a way that we could actually help people do that. And that's what PodMatch is. So PodMatch automatically, it connects guests and hosts together. It's actually very similar to like an online dating app, but I've been married too long to use any of those. I know I aged myself a little bit there by saying that, but everyone's like, oh, this is kind of like Tinder, but for podcasters. I'm like, sure, never actually used Tinder, but it sounds like that's probably right.
Sounds similar.
Yeah. So we kind of broke into 2 tiers. We have a free version because I desire to be a service to an industry that I love that's been really kind to me. And we also have a paid plan, professional plan, as we call it. And that's more for like the daily podcasters or the guest that has a new book that's coming out that they really want to get in front of just a ton of people. And that's the other option available. So we have the basic plan, the professional plan, and both work really great. We're getting really good feedback from our members with it.
Awesome. That's really good. So we're, I was just telling my staff the other day that we're going to really ramp up my podcast guest interviews this next year because
Cool.
We run a service called Push Button Podcasts, which is a full service podcasting agency. We do a white glove service for podcasters that basically goes everything from the stop record button all the way through editing and creation of social media stuff to publishing and promoting and advertising and the whole bit. So they don't have to do anything for their podcast other than show up and record. And so we're teaching a whole thing called like how you build a content machine using a podcast as the base. And so we're going to be doing a lot of podcasting and, going on other people's shows this next year to talk about that service and talk about, how you build a content machine from a podcast. So anyways, we'll probably be stepping up our game a little bit and taking advantage of what you guys do over there at PodMatch.
Yeah. And that's a great service that you're doing. I'll tell you what, it's so needed for me. Doing all of the things, as I'll just call it, which I've subbed a lot of it out. But initially I was doing it all because that's kind of where most of us start. And it's a pain to do everything podcasting related. Like I wanted to do interviews. And then I'm like, oh, but there's 35 things I have to do after an interview in order to actually get it out in front of the world and somebody actually see it. So the service you guys are providing, that white glove service, is really cool. So I'm excited that y'all are doing that.
35 is putting it mildly.
Yes.
So I remember what we've worked out is it's an average of 10 to 15 hours of work, depending on how quick you are, for every single hour of content you produce on your podcast. And so people who are doing a podcast a week, it's almost a full-time job. But you have to have a full-time job where you have people who have skills in audio editing and video editing and graphic design and writing and social media. Yeah. And so like finding one person who can do all of that is really, really difficult. Yeah. And it's one of the things that stopped our podcast from being able to go for the first couple of years because I was trying to do all of that. And it was just a pain in the rear end.
It is.
So anyways, podcasting is a super cool thing. And I know that just the way that the business community is going, was it this last year, 2019, podcasting surpassed radio listenership? Isn't that right?
Yeah, I believe so. And this year it took off even more. Like over summer, it like blew up. I mean, podcasting has just been the last couple of years in particular. Like it's kind of crazy that podcasting is 15 years old and the last 2 years have just shot through the roof with listenership. Like you can't go anywhere now and people not be talking about a podcast they heard or, oh, I've got to send you this podcast episode that I heard. And it's pretty wild, but it's definitely grown a lot.
Yeah. And what's interesting too is the term podcast has grown from like online radio show to include online video shows that may or may not be hosted on like iTunes, something like that. They'll, you know, a lot of people on YouTube are calling their shows podcasts now, and Facebook Live shows are calling their shows podcasts. And so it's sort of grown to include this like multimedia, you know, regular show content, you know, whether that's politics or, you know, like the show we have here, which is talking to, you know, getting hero stories and stuff like that. It's just turned into a huge industry, and it's only going to continue going. So
yeah, it's really cool to be watching it, to be part of it. It's really cool. It's a great time to get in for anybody who's like been thinking about it. It's a good time to jump into podcasting.
So from a business standpoint, is PodMatch your primary revenue driver in your business?
Yes, it is. Yep.
And that's full time for you?
Yeah, as of time of recording this 10 days ago. So I'm 10 days into doing it full time.
Awesome. And do you have any full-time staff other than yourself for to run that service?
It's me, my wife, and a business partner. And he and I are 50-50 in it. And my wife handles all the administration right now. And we're looking
three of you so far.
Yeah, we're looking the first week of January to hire our first VA. We're finishing up like the SOPs for them. So standard operating procedure, writing the instructions and things like that. So yeah, we're looking to add our first person January. And then we've got a CPA that we're partnered with and an attorney as well that works with us. Of course, those are contracted right now. We're not at the point where we'd want to hire them, but those are kind of like our contractors that we do some regular meetings with and make sure that we're keeping up to par on from a tax standpoint and a legal standpoint.
Yeah, that's a lot of fun. I need to do some of that stuff with the tax stuff. I know it's the end of the year, and I'm like, oh man, not a fan of taxes, but you know,
right. Yep.
So what I want to find out from you then is your origin story, right? So I say on this show, every good comic book hero has an origin story. It's the thing that made them the hero they are today. And were you born a hero, or were you bit by a radioactive spider that made you want to get into, you know, podcasting and become an entrepreneur? Or did you start in a job and eventually, you know, move into this whole entrepreneur space? Basically, you have a story. We want to know what it is.
Yeah, you know, I knew you were going to ask this question because you asked this question, and I wasn't quite sure how to answer it because I started off like born a hero, but I lost my way, I guess you could say, and went into the corporate world, which there's nothing wrong with the corporate world at all. I learned a ton from it, but I kind of made my way back to entrepreneurship many years later. But so I'm kind of like a hybrid there, if you will.
Yeah. So when did you start your first business then?
Yeah, so I started my first business at like 10 years old. It was really interesting because I got into selling used golf balls. I lived in a neighborhood that had a golf course across the street from it. I remember watching
used golf balls. Huh?
Yes, I remember. I was 10, so I remember. But I was like, one day, I would like to keep the story kind of brief here. I was driving home, or my dad was driving home. I was in the passenger seat. I saw some kids selling lemonade on the side of the road. I'm like, what are they doing? Can I do that? And my dad's like, my dad was an entrepreneur through and through. So he's like, absolutely, you can. Like, have mom go buy you this stuff, and you know all that. So I sat out there, and as a 10-year-old kid, I actually did the math in my head. I was sitting there while I was selling it. I'm like, I'm going to sell like 12 of these at my current pace before I have to go inside. And my mom paid this much for the material. And this is basically what I'm making per hour. And there's no profit in this. Like, why am I doing this? And while I'm doing this, I'm watching the golfers who are pretty close to them. And they were kind of interested in lemonade. So some of them like come over and get lemonade because we were trying to sell to people just driving by. I was like, golfers are interested. Let's move it over there. So we moved it over there. We sold a lot more, but I was watching them. And this is a neighborhood golf course. So like Tiger Woods isn't playing in this neighborhood, right? Like, every other golfer is hitting the ball into the water and then grabbing another one and hitting in the water and then throwing one over the lake and trying to hit it from there. So I was like, man, I wonder if we could like get those golf balls out, because it turns out they're pretty expensive. Like one of the guys was telling us he paid like $3 for each of those balls and he lost 3 of them at one time. I'm like, it's $9. That's more than I'm making an hour, you know? So more or less what I did is I ended up getting a golf ball retriever and started pulling out of the water and just cleaned them up and then sat out there with lemonade and golf balls to see if anyone would want them. And sure enough, these golfers started buying them. So I employed my brother and my neighbor, and we just started like creating a system. So it was like after the golf course closed for 1 hour every day, we'd go grab as many as we could. We'd clean them that next morning, and Saturday morning is when we'd like be selling it all, right? So like we just kind of get all of our inventory all week and sell on Saturday. But I can remember as a 10-year-old kid, I did this from 10 to 12 because after the age of 12, you're not really that cute anymore, and you can't get away with sitting there selling golf balls anymore. But this worked for me when I was a cute kid, right? And I remember we would make amazing. Yeah, each of us would make about $100 on a Saturday morning, which was great. So we'd be bringing $300 for the 3 of us. And that was a great business when the rest of the kids in the neighborhood were making $4 and $5 selling lemonade. And that was kind of like what opened me up to entrepreneurship. And what I thought was really cool about that is up till that point, I mean, I was only 10. So like I still had time to like develop skills, but I wasn't like very smart when it came to school. And my brothers were musicians and I didn't have that talent. And I wasn't good at video games. Like I was kind of like an awkward kid, man. Like I was like, what am I good at? Everyone else around me has some skill. And I realized, oh, I'm great at business. And without ever it being told, like my brother and my neighbor and anyone else who ever joined us, they always looked at me as the leader and like, okay, Alex, how much should we price this for? Like, how can we sell this to them? And like, we're 10-year-old kids talking about this, of course. And, but yeah, it was one of those things I really discovered like a passion for entrepreneurship at that age.
That's awesome. So my story is sort of similar. I was 13. And I had just read the Rich Dad Poor Dad books.
Okay.
And had a whole pile of things that I had ideas, lots of them. And I convinced my dad to give me a $50 loan because he wasn't going to give me money to buy materials. But I was like, if you give me a $50 loan, I'll pay you 10% interest when I get it back, right? That kind of thing. And he agreed to that. And then he did loan me the ride to the big box store. He gave me the ride to the big box store. So I went down and we bought all the big candies. So it was like the big giant nerd ropes and the big 100 grand bars, and the big Snicker bars, and all the stuff that you can't get on campus. Because I was a freshman in high school. And I brought all of my candy to school in a big bag. You know, it was like the quintessential guy on the New York street, like showing them the wares under their trench coat. Except it was my candy bag. And I sold probably $1,500 worth of candy doing that. Before I got, I tell people I got shut down by my first government agency at 13 because they told me I wasn't allowed to sell on campus without a business license.
Public school system, and it got you.
Yeah. And because I was 13, I couldn't have a business license, so I was not allowed to sell anymore. But anyways, I remember like the first lesson that I had on that was on the whole revenue versus profits. Because like I bought candy for $50 and I sold it all, and I had $100. And then I had to pay my dad back the $50 and the $10 that I owed him for, you know, the interest or whatever, $5, can't remember what it was. And then I had to go and restock my inventory, and I had even less money than I started with. And so like I had inventory, but I had no dollars. Right. I was like, what just happened? Like I sold all this stuff and I have no money. And I had to go back through the Rich Dad Poor Dad book, and like I got the next one, and I was trying to figure out what the hell happened. And then you like learn the difference between revenue and profits because I didn't know.
Man, you're brilliant though, because you also learned about inventory costs. I mean, you already passed at 13 what everyone at Shark Tank has a problem with, right? They show up and they're like, we don't have any money. We can't figure out why. And they're like, how much inventory do you have, right? Like it's the first question that gets asked. You figured this out at 13. You must be a genius, Richard. That's crazy.
Well, anyways, it was just a hard lesson, right? Because I was like, I sold all this stuff and I was like, I thought I was rich. And then I had to pay everything back and buy inventory to sell more. And I had no money. And I was like, what happened?
You're like, hold on a minute.
So I learned about inventory cost at 13, but yeah, that's how I got started in the entrepreneurship world. So anyways, it's always fun to find other people who started as kids.
We've both got like really cool stories, man. I love hearing that. Thank you for sharing that. That's cool.
Absolutely. So my next question for you then is about your superpowers, right? So every iconic hero has a superpower, whether that's, you know, a fancy flying suit made by a genius intellect or the ability to call down thunder from the sky. Heroes have what I call a zone of genius, which is either a skill or a set of skills that you were born with or you developed over a course of time that really energize all your other skills, right? It's the one skill that sort of connects everything else together. And it's the superpower that sets you apart and lets you help your clients slay their villains, so to speak, and come out on top in their own journeys. So with that sort of framing, what do you think your superpower is in business?
Yeah, I like that you use the term zone of genius. It makes me think of Gay Hendricks, who has the big leap. Like that's what he calls, like you have a zone of excellence and a zone of genius. And I think for many years, I was actually, I know I'm kind of going off course here just a little bit, but for many years, I was stuck in my zone of excellence. And that's like what pulled me away from entrepreneurship was actually getting into a big corporate job. I was really good at almost everything. I don't mean to sound like prideful by saying that, but almost everything came natural to me. I mean, I ran a sales team, I ran commercial operations. Like there was all these different things that like, if I got into them, they would do exceptionally well. And it's because I put 110% in all the time. But business, again, that's what came natural to me. But I realized years later that I was in what would be considered like a zone of excellence. Like I was good there, but it wasn't my superpower. I wasn't in my zone of genius or where I was like really able to thrive. And I realized it's because like a lot of it's because of the bureaucracy, of course, like that's involved in it, right? Like a big corporate $1 billion company, like you have to wait 6 months to do an idea. Yeah. And it just wasn't like my area. So, but what I realized later on, and as I've gotten more and more into entrepreneurship space, starting the podcast, starting PodMatch, doing all these things, I realized where I'm really good is actually responding to other people's needs and seeing an idea from that. I think that many entrepreneurs, we kind of get like a bad rap, if you will, because we have these ideas and we want to push them out of the world and we get salesy or really like marketing, like heavy about them. instead of first saying, okay, what is the need that somebody actually has? Can I find an actual human with that need? And if I can I build an idea off of that need as a response, instead of just being like, here's my idea world, take it, buy it, use it. Instead of doing that, say like, hey, what are you struggling with? How can I help? And I think that if I had one superpower, it would be that ability to be able to talk to somebody and sit down and really understand the root problem that they're having and find some sort of trend and offer a solution based off that problem that I'm seeing.
Yeah, that's really excellent. So like yesterday I was on another podcast, and it was a young college guy who wants to get into entrepreneurship and start a business. And his first thought was, I'm going to start a podcast and interview entrepreneurs and learn everything I can. I was like, genius, good on you kind of thing.
Yeah.
So he had me on, and one of his questions was like, how do you build a business? Like, how would you start? And I was like, my answer to that question was essentially is like, you have to find a group of people that have a couple of like things. First thing is they need to have a problem that's causing them pain. The second thing is they should have money and have a willingness to spend that money to solve their problem.
Yeah.
Right. And it's like, you get those two things, then your other part of the business is you develop a unique solution that solves that problem. And then your last part of the business is figuring out how you can get that solution to that market. That's your marketing and your message and all that kind of stuff. I was like, that's all there is really to business, is those three things.
Yeah.
Group of people with a problem, money, willingness to solve that problem, unique solution, and then marketing that connects those things. Everything else is just like stuff you have to figure out along the way.
Yeah, you actually got into like that last part of like actually marketing it to them, because you have to say it in a way that they can understand. You had Tim Fitzpatrick, I think it was episode 131 with him, and that was really good. Like if anyone's like, oh, this sounds really interesting, what Richard just said, like seriously go back and listen to that episode, because that was awesome, where you guys really got into like the words to use to really get that idea in front of the right people. But anyway, I don't mean to sound like an advertisement for you. I just really like that episode. And Tim's a friend, so like I had to throw it out there.
Yeah, Tim's a good guy. And I think, I'm not sure if it was Tim, but I think we may have had him on for our second episode. I don't remember. I'll have to check.
Oh, okay.
But anyways, that's a really unique thing for having as a superpower, is just realizing like not everyone sees that. Right. And it's particularly rare in the entrepreneurship world, as you said, a lot of people they start with the idea and then they try and go and find a market for it, instead of starting with the market and then building something that helps solve that market's problem, which is
you're absolutely right.
Yeah, it's a much different way to build a business, but it also generally works a lot better and faster.
Yeah, I've been a guy who's done the other way for a long time. So like this is a superpower I developed over time. Like I wasn't born with that way of just knowing to like look for those problems, but I've gotten better and better at it. And it's not just to identify the problems, because everyone has a lot of problems. And I'm not saying that like we shouldn't be sensitive to that or empathetic toward the problems people have, but they're not all an idea that you're going to be able to profit from or be able to build a business or a solution around. Like it's not always the case. And it's up to us to be able to really identify that. And I think that that's kind of like where my sweet spot is with that superpower, right? I can see the problem, but then I can also think about, is there really a solution needed here? Because a lot of people, they have like these problems. People are like, ooh, someone should build a business around that. And if you really think about it, you're like, no, that doesn't really make sense. Or like, that's not the space that I want to be in, because I don't ever see it really going anywhere. I'm not driven wholly by profit. I'm more like, I seek to be a person of value, not a person of profit. That's one of like my core beliefs. But there's some things that like, I can't really serve people if I'm spending all my time to do something that's not going to have any return. I'm going to waste all of my time, my energy on something that like is a problem that might not really exist. Right. So anyway, I know I'm rambling there a little bit, but
it's one of those, just because you can doesn't mean you should, problems. And like one of my favorites that happened just over the last couple of years is the rise of the automated bot systems that happen with like Facebook bots and, iMessage bots and all those other things. Mm-hmm. And I remember sitting down with a client who had spent an obscene amount of time building, like they recreated Zillow through a messenger bot. And I was like, why would you do that? Because no one's going to go and think to themselves, like, I want to go and talk to a robot and tell them like, go back and forth, like, hey, what kind of house do you want? And it's going to give you options. I want a 2-bedroom, and then go back to the next thing and like, what area? And you tell them and go back and forth. And you have this like 20-minute long conversation to get to the point where it shows you essentially search results in a chat thing that you then have to open up into a browser anyway. I was like, Zillow already exists. Right. And like does all that stuff way easier. Yeah. I was like, so you solved a problem that nobody wants. Like nobody wants to do that.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. That's an interesting one. I have not seen that. That must have taken an unbelievable amount of time to build those automations and those responses. But
Yeah.
I guess good project for somebody, I
It's a good
suppose.
project, and it's cool to see like what you can do, but
Yeah.
at the
Oh, of
same time,
course.
it's not ever going to be a viable business because they started with a solution and not with a group of people that had a problem. Because like that group of people that have a problem already have the solution for it, and this solution is not better; it's worse. Like
Yeah.
it's phone tree on text message.
Right. True. Yeah. I mean, testing the market is really important and seeing what's already out there. I think a lot of us, we get so excited when we have an idea that we just like, ooh, I'm going to start doing this. But it's really important to do your due diligence and make sure, okay, is there anyone else already in this space doing exactly what I'm thinking? Because you don't want to get like 6 months in and be like, oh man, there's like 4 or 5 big players in this space that really own it. Like that shouldn't stop you if you really have the desire to do it. But if it's already there, you have to really think, okay, do I have any unique value I'm going to add? Do I solve a problem in a different way than the rest of these people, or am I planning on doing exactly the same thing? Because yeah, you might not want to actually jump into that. It's something to really be mindful of, is to take a look around before you just take action.
So I want to dive into one other thing that you mentioned, because I think it's a really unique framing for that, and that's the idea of the zone of excellence versus zone of genius. So I had a real good friend of mine a couple of years ago. Now got in front of we had a small group mastermind. There's like 6 of us, and all had hit certain revenue levels in our business, and we're looking to take it to the next level. And she used to work with high-end like Fortune 5,000 CEOs and help them grow and things like that. And all of them are millionaires, multimillionaires, billionaires, that kind of stuff, like super successful dudes and ladies. And she was like, there was the common thread that all of them had, and she would talk to them all about this. So it's like every single one of them, if they were in that millionaire plus category running a big successful business, they all had the one rule that they followed, and it was like you have your one thing, right? What we might refer to as your zone of genius, and like they were ruthless about only doing their one thing, and everything else got delegated to other people. And learning how to do that. And her encouragement to us was like, you need to figure out what your one thing is. And I like the framing of like, there's a lot of things you can be really good at, like you're there in your zone of excellence, but there's the one thing that's your zone of genius. And like, that's where you can really next level. And for me, it was learning how to see and think in systems. That's like my zone of genius. And that's where like the Push Button podcast was built and turned into a nice scalable business for me. And I'm just sort of interested in like, what are your thoughts for someone who's sort of in that space and struggling, looking at the things like, hey, I've got a whole group of things on my plate here that I'm pretty good at, that I can do good things with, I can make profit with, but how do you sort of determine in that plate of things, what is your zone of excellence versus what's your zone of genius?
Yeah, first off, we've all got like that zone of genius, and the idea is to get yourself into that zone of genius from excellence, right? Like, because we're all going to be in that excellence phase, and you have to spend some time there. Like, you can't say, okay, I'm only going to be a genius. And I know I sound like Gay Hendricks right now, if anyone has ever read his book, but he talks about like how we have to do the things we're excellent at, but we also have to find a way to get into that genius zone. And I think for me, the first thing that we have to do, because many people don't actually know what it is. Like many entrepreneurs, that they're good at a lot of things. Like entrepreneurs these days are so savvy and like smart. Like it's rare that I talk to somebody who's like an entrepreneur that I'm not like, wow, you're a genius. Like I could learn so much from you, but like not everything they're doing is pure genius. Like when they're posting something on their social media, unless they are actually in that space, like that's an administrative task for them at some sense. And they might be excellent at it, but again, that's not the thing. So I think the first practice that I recommend to people is to sit down alone with a piece of paper and a pen in a place that you are highly inspired. So for me, I've mentioned I'm in Jacksonville, Florida. I live just a few minutes from the ocean. To me, it's to go walk out to the ocean and sit there alone, no phone, no music. It's just me, a pen, and some paper. And I think about it. Okay, like what is
waves?
Yeah, that's it, man. But like I feel inspired in that area, and I at that moment I'm like, okay, what am I really good at? What do I uniquely add to the world? Like, what's my value add? How do I serve people in the strongest, most powerful way that I possibly can, and figure out what that genius is, or that superpower, right? Like, how do I really figure this out? And the thing is, we all really know this. We just have to dig deep enough to find it sometimes. And if anyone's like, I just don't even know where that is, it's a combination of something that you are far better than most people at, and something that you thoroughly enjoy. Like I'm really good at keeping a schedule and a calendar, but that is not my zone of genius. Like that's not it, because I don't necessarily enjoy it. It's going to be something that gets your passion going, that gets you excited, that you also are just really good at. But finding it, I think, starts with just getting alone. And that for me has been a great practice that I do on a regular basis. Quarterly, I try to sit down and really think about it. It's not that it's changing every quarter, but I refresh and I'm like, okay, let me make sure I get back to it. Alex, am I actually doing the thing that is my superpower, or have I slipped away and gone more just into the administrative excellence that I carry myself in?
Yeah. So I have a couple of recommendations along the same line. So I think absolutely should get alone and think through those things and actually like get some ideas about where you're at. And then the next sort of step there is like learning how to filter the things that you've put down. And for me, the filter that I always tell either clients and friends stuff who are trying to work through things and figure out where they fit is anything that anytime you run into a thought, or you're discussing things with other people and you say, "Oh, that's easy," right?
Yeah,
that's easy. Anyone could do that. Like that's a tell that you're skirting around your zone of genius, because it's easy for you. And the reason it's easy is because you have both the skill set and the joy that goes with it, right? That's sort of the tell that you're finding the right spot. And the other one is generally speaking, your superpower, your zone of genius, is going to have a thread that sort of runs through all of your other things, right? So like for me, and this took me forever to figure out, because my zone of genius is in, like, I see the world in systems, right? I don't actually like see the things. I see the systems that make them happen. You're
in the Matrix. I get it.
Yeah, like that kind of thing. I see all the little code things, right? Not actually code, but I like, I've mentioned on the podcast a few times, like last year I was like, I need to learn to draw. So I took a drawing class, and like, I didn't listen to the teacher as much as like a normal person would. I was like watching what they were doing and breaking down their system. Because most people don't know how to break down their own systems as well as like I do. And like by the end of the month, I was like drawing human anatomy stuff. And my wife is like, "You're just dumb." Like, not because you're dumb, but because I hate you, because it took me years to get as good as it took you to get in like 4 weeks.
That's funny, man.
And so, so my zone of genius allows me to get good at things really quick. So I have a lot of things that have fallen into that zone of excellence. And what I realized was like, hey, it's the thing that's actually making me have a wide zone of excellence is all these little things they're all tied together back to this one zone of genius. And everyone that I've talked to, that we've really sat down and dived into where the zone of genius is, you can find that, right? So one of my best friends and business partners, his superpower is empathy. Like it's awesome. Amazing. Yeah, his ability incredible to like put himself into someone else's shoes and like actually experience the world the way that they do, just insane.
I want that one. I was real quick. I don't mean to cut you off. I was on another podcast and they asked me what my superpower is or what I wish it could be. And I went what I wish it could be. And I wish I could be empathy. That's incredible that you know somebody like that. Anyway, don't mean to cut you off, but that's an outstanding superpower to have.
It's an excellent superpower. And he's one of the coolest guys I know. And it's super fascinating because we started going through, he's got the same kind of thing where he's got a lot of things that he's really good at. And we started going back through his life and like, how did you get good at this thing? And when we really think about it, it all came back to like, he had this skill and empathy that allowed him to understand people and really like dive into things and get them. And right. Anyways, it's the common thread in all of his things in his zone of excellence was they all came back to that empathy. Right. And mine, same thing, the breadth of excellence that you had, they all came back to my love of systems. And I would imagine if you really thought about it, a lot of the things that fit into your zone of excellence are going to come back to that, that ability to see the solution to problems that are being presented.
Yeah, you're 100% right, man. And I think that, anyone who's listening who's like, oh, wow, this makes so much sense. The goal is to figure out how to operate in your genius, right? In your superpower, because if you're doing a podcast, even there is so much work that goes into it. Like we talked about, it's like, okay, how can I get more of my time to do the thing that is my superpower, that is my zone of genius, instead of getting, I guess, bombarded and stuck in just what I'm decent at or above average or that I have to do, right? Like that becomes the ultimate question for people to answer, I'd say.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's like, that's the tough part is like, how do you build a business that is based around your zone of genius? And what I mean by based around it is that your contribution to the business is directly in your zone of genius, right? It doesn't need to mean that like, hey, I'm good at systems, therefore my business is selling systems, right? That's not what it means. It means that like your contribution to whatever problem you've chosen to solve for people is in your zone of genius. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Oh yeah, it definitely does.
Yeah.
And I'm in complete agreement. That's what it's all about. That's how you succeed long term and don't turn into more of like a cog, if you will, right? Like someone who just now is stuck doing the task. They can't ever grow anything. Like that's how you keep yourself growing, keep the business excelling, is by being able to do exactly what you're talking about here, man. I think that you're hitting it just right, Richard.
Well, thank you. So I want to flip that then and talk about the other side of your superpower, which is your fatal flaw, right? So just like every Superman has their kryptonite, or Wonder Woman can't remove her bracelets of victory without going mad, you probably have a flaw that's held you back in your business, something that you struggled with. For me, it was a couple of things, right? I, for the longest time, struggled with perfectionism, where I wouldn't actually ship products or services because I was like, there's just another couple of tweaks I can make, or maybe I could re-record that video for the thousandth time because I needed to be exactly perfect, right? Whatever it is, I struggled with perfectionism for a long time until I realized that it's like the lowest standard that you can hold yourself to. Or one of the other ones was lack of self-care, which came across in a lot of ways. But the first and the most important aspect for that for me was I would let clients walk all over me. I didn't have any good boundaries set up, like calendars, phone times, when people could get a hold of me. And I said yes to everything. And a lot of that was just being a young entrepreneur and needing revenue and not learning how to actually like set up healthy boundaries and set up good healthcare, and then like actually, take care of yourself so you were healthy and fit to come, show up and do good work. So like those are a couple of my flaws. And I think, but more important than what they are is how have you worked to rectify them? So people who are listening might learn a little bit from your experience.
Yeah, so I've got two that I'm going to share. The first of which is that perfectionism, as you called it, and the other is an addiction to productivity. I'll start off with talking about the perfectionism. So for a long time, I was like you. I was like, oh, I could just record this video one more time, it'd be great. Or if this website could just look a little bit more like this, it'd be like perfect, right? Like how many times have we said that? Like, and having that standard, that idea isn't a bad thing. It's how you learn to manage it, right? Because it is dangerous. Here's the thing: nothing is ever perfect. Like, I'm a believer. I'm a Christian. I follow Jesus. And even the Bible says like, well done, good and faithful servant is what you'll hear one day when you go to heaven. Not perfect job. Like God doesn't even have that standard for us. And we do, right? Like, so it's kind of crazy that we hold ourselves to that, but I get that we have this desire to do something excellent for people. But it goes back to what my superpower actually is. And this is how I learned to overcome it. I let my superpower drive me instead of one of my biggest downfalls, if you will. And if I truly am creating something to serve somebody, it's in my best interest to meet their need as quickly as I possibly can without it being perfect, because they're just looking for a solution. Here's a great example of this. And this was actually from Seth Godin. And this is something I learned from him when he and I had a conversation. He said, Alex, if you were a lifeguard, new lifeguard, not really that great, you're not perfect at it, you haven't figured it all out yet, and you saw someone drowning in the water, would you go out and save them? Or would you first go try to find a better lifeguard that can go out there and save them because they could probably do a better job with it? And that was like a light bulb moment for me. I was like,
wow, that's good.
In the water, and I would go pull that person out of the water, even if it was ugly and if I did it wrong. Like I would make sure that I did that to go save that person. And I think as entrepreneurs, we have to think about that. If we're struggling with perfectionism, we have to be willing to start exactly where we're at, to start serving the need that someone else has. So for me, PodMatch was a great example. We launched that thing at MVP level. I mean, it was ugly. Like it hurt
minimum
me to
viable
launch.
product.
Yeah, thank you. Minimum viable product. Like it was functional. It worked. It solved the problem, but it did not look pretty doing it. There was nothing sexy about it yet. But here's the thing: everyone who was using it forgave me for that, because they're like, "Oh, this is great. It's solving my need. It's helping me. It's doing what it needs to do." And over time, you should be focused on continuous improvement, right? Like get better over time. And so that's what I've been able to do. And so PodMatch was a great example of me learning to overcome that perfectionist mindset, if you will. And the other thing that I still struggle with, this is probably still a current struggle for me that I'm working through, but I'm addicted to productivity, which like maybe sounds a little like, no, that's a good thing, right? Like I like to be productive, but sometimes I spend too long in my inbox because I'm like, I could probably get to inbox 0 today if I keep at it. Right. And then I'm not working on my superpower, my zone of genius. I'm working on something that I'm good at, which is getting through my inbox and keeping it clean. But that's productivity for the sake of productivity, not productivity for the sake of results or solving a need or meeting a problem. And that's one that I still have to meet through. And that comes with just a lot of self-discipline of setting even like literally on my phone, I will set a 30-minute clock and be like, you can play in your inbox for 30 minutes and then you've got to stop. And Alex, you've got to delegate this because you can't just sit here and do this.
Quick question on that. Do you have children? I know you mentioned you're married.
I am, but I do not have kids.
So this might sound like a strange recommendation. Have kids. it'll fix that.
Wait, they'll fix that one.
So and here's what I mean by that. All right. So because I used to do the same thing. And I was like, I could just work a little bit more. I could work a little bit longer. I could get a little bit more done. Right. And you realize a lot of those things aren't, they're, I mean, if you've ever seen that little thing where it's like, you've got urgent and important.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Right. And like a lot of those things are urgent, but they're not important. And when you have, at least for me, becoming a dad changes you. And you get to this point where you're like, the things that I want to do, like everything in my life is geared towards like, how can I spend more time playing and doing cool things with my kids while they're growing up? Because you realize I don't have a lot of time, right? My oldest son's 11 already. I'm like, I've only got like 7 years before this kid's gonna move out and go on his own. And I got to cram a whole lot of life into the next 7 years.
Yeah.
So when it comes down to it, the actual like science behind it is something I talk about all the time on our podcast, and when I get on to other guest podcasts, is the idea that creativity thrives with restrictions, right? It thrives with boundaries. And early in my entrepreneur career, I say early just because it was like 5 or 6 years ago, but it was really like halfway through because I've only been doing this for 10 or 11 years now.
Yeah.
I had this thought that I was like, I want to work less but get more done, right? And already that's a better question than, can I just work more? So ask yourself better questions. It's a type of boundary. But the other thing that came out of that is like, what if I started making restrictions? What if instead of working until I was out of breath during the day, like what if I restricted myself to working 8 hours a day, right? And instead of 7 days a week, what if I restricted it to 5 days a week? And eventually that became, what if I didn't work on Fridays, to what if I only work 4 hours a week or a day, right? And like my average day now is 4 hours a day, 4 days a week, and my business is 5 or 6 times bigger than it was 5 years ago.
That's awesome, man.
Right. And that's what that does is you realize that like I was just reading one of my friends on Facebook this morning. He's got a big business. He's like, just because I work less than you doesn't mean that I don't outwork you.
Right.
Right. And because you realize that like, hey, when you start putting the restrictions on it, what happens is you start focusing on the things that are only in the important category.
That's right.
And delegating everything else. And for me, having the kids was a motivation to make sure that I was only spending time on stuff that was important. So if I did have to tell my kids, no, I can't play right now, I was like, because I'm working on something important for my business, not because I'm trying to get to inbox 0, which is meaningless.
Right. Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
So I don't know if that helps at all, but that's one of the things that helped me.
100%, man. Like, and like when I say I haven't like figured this one out quite yet, it's because I'm implementing disciplines along the way. And that's like what's helping me. So I don't chase inbox 0 very often, but it's because I have that timer set. But if I turn off that timer, I'll be in there until late at night. But it's true, even in the corporate jobs, like we know that 40 hours a week has been proven to get more productivity out of a employee than if they work 50 or 60. They can do more with less time because they know they have to prioritize. Everyone understands like, okay, these are things that my bosses tell me I have to get done. If he tells me I've got 40 hours to do it or 60, I can get it done in 40. And most people can. They kind of avoid the rest of it. So, I mean, I learned that with my staff in corporate. And but this is one of those things that like is a constant battle, and it's all comes down to self-discipline for me because there's not a lot of results that come from it. It's just I'm addicted to that productivity. Like it seems like fun to me, but it's one that I'm learning to continue to overcome and working on frameworks to be able to figure out how to do that. But what you shared is definitely super helpful.
Yeah, that's it's my my thing I tell everyone is like, if you want to get more productive, start putting restrictions on what you are allowing yourself to do for work. Because it does a couple of things for you. One, you get the benefit of more time to spend on stuff that you actually enjoy that isn't work. And I tell people all the time, you have to give yourself permission to play. Because for whatever reason, culturally in America, at least, we think that in order to do when we do good work, we get to reward ourselves with recreation instead of realizing that like recreation and rest are required in order to show up and do good work.
Yeah.
And anyways, it gives you more time to actually get into that self-care and give yourself permission to play and enjoy life a little bit. Because then you can show up and kick ass when you need to.
That's right. 100%, man.
So my next question for you is about your common enemy, right? And every superhero has an arch nemesis. It's the thing that they constantly have to do battle with in their world. In the world of business, it takes on a lot of forms, but generally we like to put it in the context of your clients, right? So for the clients you have for wow, I'm going to mess this up. PodMatch.
PodMatch.
There we go. Yeah. PodMatch. So, and it's a mindset or it's a flaw that you sort of run into regularly, that you're like, banging your head against the wall going like, why do I always have to deal with this with our clients? And if you had your magic wand and every new client you could take on, you could just bap them on the head and not have to deal with that anymore, what would you say your arch nemesis is for PodMatch?
Yeah. So right now, because we are still very early phase, I mean, this idea, like I had the idea for it on March 10th, 2020. So when we're recording this, it's less than a year old still. And so we're kind of figuring out like where those things are, like what's the problems, what's the solutions that are needed. I'd say the biggest issue right now is finding the right people to join that don't have 100 questions. And I have no problem answering questions, but some people, they want to jump on a call. And at first I was like, oh, great, someone's interested, I'll jump on a call. But then I started doing the math. These calls are 20 minutes a piece, and they want to talk about it for 20 minutes before they want to sign up. And it's a free membership. I could spend my whole day talking to a handful of people that are going to sign up, and not one of them convert to a paying client. And I want to get to know the right people, the people that I feel I can learn from, but I can't jump on a call with everybody. So I think if there was a way to, and this is something that I have to do in my messaging, to really clarify it, to have some sort of like video series or something like that, can be like, hey, can't jump on a call right now, but here's something that really explains it really well. I know that would be super helpful. And yeah, I mean, I have a desire to get on the call with every single person who wants to use it, but it's just not realistic. Like I'll use every moment of my life doing that with very little result, but it's how to really come up against that. And it's very common. Like, oh, this sounds great, Alex. Love to jump on a call. And, how do I respond in a nice way and say no? Like, because I have to, if I'm going to help the other members and onboard more people and continue, adding that value and being a service.
Your service has a network. Your service has a network effect, right?
Yeah.
The more people you get on it, the better it is for everyone.
Exactly. 100%, man. Yeah. It's how do you get to that point without having to jump on the random call? So right now that enemy is the common response, and people mean very well by it. Like, oh, Alex, I'd love to jump on a call. And that's kind of what I'm facing right now.
So it almost seems to me that like you'd need to have like two forms of messaging, right? For the podcast guests and for the podcast hosts, because we have a different set of problems. Mm-hmm. And you'll have to hit those problems, differently. I don't exactly know where you should go with that, but anyways, that's just like in my head, because I do both like guesting on podcasts and as a host. And like for me, as a host, like the couple of things, and I like, just by the way, when I pulled up your thing on PodMatch to bring you on here, genius. Like I want all of my guests to come through and give me a link like that, because like I'll when I ask for people for like, hey, their information, it's got like your photo and your bio and all those things on it. Like I will get sometimes 3 or 4 page long bios, and I'm like,
right,
I can't introduce you with a 4-page bio. And
3-hour episode.
Like I don't have time to read it all and then pick out the good stuff. I need you to do that. Like that's where it's at. So like I love the way yours popped up and it had like a nice short bio on it, so I can introduce you, things like that. So like hosts have a different set of problems than guests do, mm-hmm. Right? And guests are probably going to be more along the lines of like learning how to know what is my story that I'm going to tell, that's interesting enough that podcast guests or podcast hosts want to bring me on and talk to their audience. And not everyone knows how to do that, right? We've done 150 episodes now on our podcast, and I would say probably about 70% of them are pretty solid, but we run into about 30% of the guests that like they don't actually know their story real well, so it's hard to pull it out of them. And the better you get as an interviewer, the easier that becomes, where you can help a guest through that. But the guests like yourself who really know your story and really know what you're talking about, those are the guests that are a pleasure to have on, right? And I think from a service standpoint, as someone who's looking to bring guests on, if I could go to your service and more of the people that I get on through your service have that like nailed down, that would just make me happy in every way.
Yeah, no, I hear you, man. 100%. Yeah. That makes so much sense, really, because like finding the people that can really hone their craft and know what they're doing it can be tough, but kind of providing a framework for it definitely helps out, right? Being like, hey, this is what people are probably going to ask you, or what questions would you want them to ask you? And that's part of the, onboarding with PodMatch. It's really helpful for people, and it adds a lot of value to them and to the people that are interested in booking them or that they're being booked by.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. So the flip side then of your common enemy is your driving force, right? So just like Spider-Man fights to save New York, or Batman fights to save Gotham, or Google fights to index and categorize all the world's information, what is it that you are fighting for with PodMatch?
Yeah. So you mentioned like the network effect is obviously the end goal, if you will, but it all kind of started from a place of I noticed that there was a need in this industry. And like I said, I had that problem. I started with my own podcast. It's tough to find people who would be guests. On the flip side, there's people who have great stories that they want to share. They have a new book out that they're excited about. Like, how can they get that out there in this world? And for me, that's what we're protecting. We want to make sure that great interviews happen because so many people are starting to listen to podcasts. I mean, more than ever before, listening as well. We want to make sure that good quality content is getting out there. You know, we talked about those people that actually have like the story that they know they want to share. Like, we're finding those people and getting them in front of a podcast host where then people are a few hundred people maybe are listening to it, but it's helping change a life. And so for me, it's just really making this system streamlined so that people can get on there and just focus on the interview and just crush it, have like the right people that fit the show and the vision of it, right? So the world can hear some great content. I know that's like a huge kind of broad vision, but Richard, man, that's what I'm here doing.
So a thing that just popped into my head while you were saying that is something that I've been terrible at, that I wish I had been doing a better job at, is as an interviewee, right? As the host of a show. One of the things that I think, actually it probably goes both ways, is having some sort of a review system that was like at the end of the interview, it's like, hey, what's it like being interviewed by Richard on the Hero Show? And on the flip side of that, what's it like having Richard as a guest on your show, just for like social proof stuff that you could start using and sending in when you're like looking to book guests or get on people on your show. That'd be a cool thing to figure out, mostly because I want it and I haven't ever figured out how to get it, like actually turn it into a thing for my own
We built that in the
process.
PodMatch, actually. We built that into it. It's at the end of the process. It asks the guest how the host did and the host how the guest did, and they give some opportunities for reviews and stuff like that. So we kind of built that in a little bit. Not quite to the level you're saying yet, but we are going to get there.
Yeah, that's cool. Well, you guys are not even a year old yet, so I imagine a couple of years down the line, you guys will be a top-notch service in the podcast space. So that'd be super cool to see how it goes down. So I want to talk about something more practical, like day-to-day work style stuff. And I call this your hero's tool belt. And it's just like every superhero has their tool belt, with awesome gadgets like batarangs or web slingers or laser eyes or whatever it is. I want to talk about the top 1 or 2 tools you use every day in your business that you couldn't live without. Right? Could be anything from your notepad to your calendar to your marketing tools, something you use for your product delivery. Could be the beach that you go to sit down and listen to the crashing waves while you talk, right? Something that you just think is essential to getting your job done on a daily basis today.
Yeah. So the first one I'll mention is some form of daily journal. It is really important. It helps me a lot. I like ones that have it's more like a day planner. So it has some sort of calendar in it as well. Like, yes, I use a digital calendar. I'm not like, living in the dark ages or anything like that, but I reproduce everything on an actual piece of paper as well. So right now I'm using the Intention Journal by Brandon Turner, Bigger Pockets guy, and it's maybe kind of catered towards real estate investing, but it works great. I've used Brennan Brouchard's high performance calendar, or maybe it was journal or something like that. But I like to switch them up a little bit to kind of just, again, keep my flow. I keep my calendar on there, but it helps me really determine what I'm going to do that day. That's the point of these things. They're focused on intentionality. So it helps me understand, okay, this is the task that I have to get done today. And that's so important. I think to Keller Williams, he talks about the one thing, right? They have him and Jay Papasan have that book, The One Thing. Like, what is the one thing that if I do it today, I will get closer to my end goal tomorrow? And these journals really help me do that. So that's the number one thing that, it's literally, I don't have hardly anything in reach of me right now, but it's right here, right next to me. Like, I've got it always ready to go. And I'd say aside from that, the tool that I've been really using with my business partner to keep us on track with PodMatch and keep it growing in a healthy way is we use Trello. And we really enjoy that, just from keeping our tasks organized, keeping our chats in one place. You can build individual cards. So it's like everything's like a little project in there. That's really helped us stay organized. Like, I think about trying to do what I'm doing without that, it'd be really tough to have the same level of progress and productivity, meaningful work getting done if I didn't have that tool. So those would be my 2 things. The journal and Trello are 2 things I'm using right now.
Yeah. We run our whole business on Trello. I have a training.
Cool.
I have a training on Trello I'll send you, which is all about the language of business systems.
Yes, I need that.
It's called Push Button Process, but it really should be called How to Make Trello Your Bitch or something like that.
Whatever you're calling it, just send it to me. I want it. All right, Richard.
But if you learn to think through business systems properly, right, and you actually get the language right, because a lot of people use the word system and process and workflow interchangeably without having really solid definitions for what they are. So I teach people all the time. It's one of the things I do sort of like on the side, because like my life and like my life's work is systems, right? That's how I think and operate. So is how to have a really solid language for systems, because if you know how to speak about systems, then when you get into something that helps you manage systems like Trello, that's what it is. It's a system management, right? Or project management, is then you can make Trello be like Trello is already pretty good. But when you really understand how a system flows together, you can really make it sing, right? And it doesn't matter if it's Trello or not. It could be Trello or Asana or any of the project management systems out there. If you understand the foundational language of like how a system works and how it flows and what the things go into it, you can do some really, really awesome stuff. And for us, like we manage our entire podcast business scalably in a way that like I don't even have to touch it. It just does everything on its own.
That's
because
awesome.
of Trello and because of that kind of stuff. So.
Yeah, I want to see what you've worked up there, man. You've got more experience than I do, but I'm already thankful for the tool. So I'm excited to learn more about it.
Absolutely. Trello is super cool. I don't know what we would do without it. And I'm there. The journaling thing, however, I have this problem in my life that if I take it from my head and I write it onto a piece of paper, it like legitimately is gone. Like I can't. Like it's just forever gone. Like I'm the kind of person that, like, once it's on paper, it doesn't exist anymore. I have had to in the past be like, hey, what happened to that check that was written to me because it was on a piece of paper and I threw it in the garbage on accident? Like paper things don't go well with me. So like I don't even handle cash, because like when we get cash, I give it to my wife because I'm like, I will lose this.
Yeah, I do the same thing actually. Yeah, that one's true for me too. I give it away a lot, and she's like, dude, you got to stop giving away money. I'm like, I just don't know what to do with it. Like when I like the digital money, right? Like
that makes sense. So like all of my calendars and all of my, like, even if I'm doing like going through the thing of like, hey, I know what my next things are. I have to do it all on my phone because my phone is going to ding me,
right,
and remind me what the next thing is. And my calendar, like if I wrote it down and put it on the thing there, it's never going to ding me, and I'm never going to remember to look at it. So,
true.
So it's never worked for me, but it does work for a lot of people. My wife's that way. Hers, however, I guarantee you is way prettier than yours, because she spends an obscene amount of time putting stickers and decorating and coloring and doing all sorts of doodles and whatnot, because apparently that's a thing. Right.
I have chicken scratch handwriting, and it's all in black ink, and there's no pictures or designs, but maybe I need to step it up a little bit. I don't know.
No, I mean, like there's like a whole thing. There's like bullet journaling. If you look up bullet journaling on YouTube, like there's people that are like really into it, and they like every month, like calendar thing is like a work of art. My wife's is like that. And I'm like, she's like, you don't understand. If it's pretty, then I actually get all the stuff done. If it's not pretty, then I don't. And I'm like, don't get it, but I'm glad it works for you, because she runs our house like a boss. So
nice. It goes back to me talking about like one of those things I'm trying to overcome is being addicted to productivity, which partially isn't always bad, right? That doesn't sound productive to me. I'd rather just quickly write it down and check it off as soon as it's done, right? Like that's what I look at. But hey, our minds all work differently, and it's cool that works for her. I could probably maybe take a note or two from that and learn something.
Yep. And it cracks me up, because every month, or she does it at the beginning of every week, she sits down and like plans out the whole week, because we got 4 kids and 3 of them are in homeschool, and she runs the house and like manages our travel and does all sorts of stuff. So she's got a lot of stuff to do, and to run our house, especially when we travel and do all this, all the things we do. So if it works for her and it keeps it running, I was like, if I had to replace all the things that my wife does, it would cost me like $300,000 a year in employees.
I can't imagine.
Speaking of heroic tools, I want to take a few minutes to tell you about a tool we built that powers the Hero Show and is now this show's primary sponsor. Hey there, fellow podcaster. Having a weekly audio and video show on all the major online networks that builds your brand, creates fame, and drives sales for your business doesn't have to be hard. I know it feels that way because you've tried managing your show internally and realize how resource intensive it can be. You felt the pain of pouring 8 to 10 hours of work into just getting 1 hour of content published and promoted all over the place. You see the drain on your resources, but you do it anyways because you know how powerful it is. Heck, you've probably even tried some of those automated solutions and ended up with stuff that makes your brand look cheesy and cheap. That's not helping grow your business. Don't give up though. The struggle ends now. Introducing Push Button Podcasts, a done-for-you service that will help you get your show out every single week without you lifting a finger after you've pushed that stop record button. We handle everything else: uploading, editing, transcribing, writing, research, graphics, publication, and promotion, all done by real humans who know, understand, and care about your brand almost as much as you do. Empowered by our own proprietary technology, our team will let you get back to doing what you love while we handle the rest. Check us out at pushbuttonpodcast.com/hero for 10% off the lifetime of your service with us, and see the power of having an audio and video podcast growing and driving micro celebrity status and business in your niche without you having to lift more than a finger to push that stop record button. Again, that's pushbuttonpodcast.com/hero. See you there. You're listening to The Hero Show, unlocking the power of influence and success.
So my next question for you then is about your own personal heroes, right? So every hero has their mentors, right? Frodo had Gandalf, Luke had Obi-Wan, Robert Kiyosaki had his rich dad, Spider-Man even had his Uncle Ben, right? So who were some of your heroes? Were they real-life mentors, speakers or authors, maybe peers who were a couple of years ahead of you? And how important were they, what you've accomplished so far in your business?
Yeah, so I've got more than I can mention. So I'll go with like a few that that really helped me along the way. One, an indirect one, was Brendan Brouchard. Has really been helpful for me. He has a book called High Performance Habits, and it really spoke to me. Like, he's, again, an indirect mentor. I've never met him, never talked to him, but he had this book that really helped me figure out some pieces that I was missing, like as a hero, right? And the main thing I pulled from his book was the habit of courage and stepping out and overcoming fear. It was things I had never really thought about, and I had gotten complacent in my life over years. And he was the person who really helped me figure that out. So Brendan Brouchard would be definitely one of them. And then I've got some local, like some hometown heroes, if you will, some people that have been in my life. One of which is my dad. He's always been an entrepreneur, and he's just brilliant. Like, he has an engineer mind. He can step into like almost any kind of business, unless it's all digital. Like, if it's all digital, he doesn't quite get it. But if there's like a product or a service you're providing, he can walk in and within minutes figure out like an entire new way to do things that is usually a lot better than the way it's getting done. He's just always had that mind. So I've always really appreciated him. And then I've got a couple of friends that are in a mastermind of mine. I'll mention two of them, Andy and Paul. And those two guys have just really done so well in their space. One of them is in the flipping homes side of things, and they have like a TV show now and stuff like that. And I met him when he had none of that. And the other guy, he's in the education field, and he's helped rewrite the way that Florida handles education. Which is incredible to just see what these two guys have achieved. They've always pushed me just to do better and help me find that genius, if you will, within me. And those are some people that have really helped me along the way and been mentors and just kind of guided me along the way.
Yeah. I love your couple of buddies. I always refer to the people like that as like your running mates.
Yeah.
You may not be running the same race, but you're both running together, moving forward. And it's a type of fellowship that I don't know personally like how entrepreneurs could survive without those people. Right. The ones who are running their own race, doing their own thing, but just getting to watch and see them massage their excellence, so to speak, right, and become better versions of themselves is always, inspiring and helps you move forward. And I got a good friend like that like literally everything I do, I always bring it to him and be like, hey, what do you think of this? Just because I know after he's taken a look at it, it's going to be better, right? So I think those people are super important.
Yeah, they've been really like, and they're honest. I've given them permission to be honest to me as well. Like, and I have some bad ideas. Like, we're all, here's the thing. Entrepreneurs in general have far more bad ideas than good ideas. You just need someone to tell you so you don't do anything with it, right? Like, and I've definitely been, like, it's been true for me, right? And they'll be like, hey, Alex, like, you might want to develop that idea a little bit more. And usually I'm like, yeah, this is a terrible idea. What am I doing here? But like, those people, they have that freedom in my life, and I've had it in their lives as well. And I always kind of go back to this Helen Keller quote, alone we can do so little, but together we can do so much. And I've always thought that's just really beautiful. Like you're saying, even if we're not necessarily running the same race, we're still building each other up, encouraging each other, and we get more done when we're around those type of people. So we do our best to, even during like the whole season of COVID, to still meet together, to get together, and to just have these conversations that builds us up and helps us carry our business and our craft forward.
Yeah. So your conversation on ideas reminded me of a thing that always cracks me up. Is in ancient Greece, whenever they had big like political ideas and business ideas that they were going on, one of the habits that the Greek people were in back in the day was you had to be able to talk through your idea, and it had to make sense both when you were sober and when you were drunk.
What?
And I was like, that always cracked me up because it's like you have to take your ideas like, and they have to pass muster,
Yeah,
in both areas in order for them to be worthy of like taking on to the next stage. Because
that's cool.
we have a lot of bad ideas, and I was like, that
Yeah.
always sort of. I don't know if that works or not, but we all still talk about ancient Greece, so maybe it was a good thought.
Now I'm picturing like with these guys next time I meet with them, like we'll all be sober and share ideas, and then we'll all get wasted at some restaurant and share our terrible ideas or whatever they might be, and then we'll get kicked out. I don't know if it still works, Richard. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I have no idea, but I figure if you're all, you have a couple of drinks or I don't know, a happy brownie or something and you come up with great ideas, if it's a great idea then and then it's still a great idea when you're sober, then maybe you got something.
Okay, I like it. We're gonna give it a shot, maybe.
Awesome. So I want to talk about one last thing here, which is your guiding principles. And one of the things that makes heroes heroic is that they live by a code. For instance, Batman never kills his enemies. He only ever brings them to Arkham Asylum. So as we wrap up the interview, I want to talk about top one, maybe two principles that you use regularly in your life. Maybe something you wish you knew when you first got started as an entrepreneur.
Yeah, the first thing is to always operate from a place of integrity. That's my number one core value in life, is to have integrity in everything I do, which means don't take the shortcuts that you shouldn't take. Just because you can do something a little bit quicker doesn't mean it's the right way to do things. So I make sure that everything I do comes from a place of absolute integrity above the bar. I believe the only thing that any of us own is the good name that we have. And as soon as you damage that, that's it. So I want to make sure that Alex Sanfilippo is known as somebody who operates at the highest caliber, the highest standard, a place of integrity, no duplicity in my life at all. And I've really kind of allowed that to just be everything. And I'll mention the second one because it's really close with it. It's to be humble, to walk in a place of humility, to serve others with my time, with my life. It can't be about me. On my board behind me, I have something that's written that says, seek to be a person of value, not a person of profit. And yes, I make profit, and yes, I need profit, but ultimately that's not what drives me. What drives me is from a place of humility to serve those around me. And those are really my two core values, me personally, and I carry those into business because I just found that they've served me well and they've helped me really add value to the world around me. And ultimately, as an entrepreneur, that's my job, right? Is to make the world a better place. And those are the things that have helped me do that.
Yeah. You mentioned earlier you were a Christian, so you'll probably appreciate this. One of the things that I've always pointed people to is, Jesus talks. I can't remember exactly where. I think it's like Matthew 25. But he's talking about how the world works, right? And one of the things he says is, give first, and then you'll receive, right? And it's a lot of people think it's an admonition, like, hey, this is what you should do, and it's not an admonition. What it is like, hey, I built the world, and these are the rules that you play by, right? So if you want to succeed playing this game, this is how it works, right? And that's what I think most of the Sermon on the Mount is not an admonition of this is what you should do, but like, hey, I built this game.
Right. Yeah.
And if you want to play the game by the rules that'll help you win, like these are the ones you play by. And so the whole learning to give first and to give value first is it's not this is what you should do. It's like, hey, this is the best option you have to build the biggest and most impactful business that you can, is right. Learn how to give first, like learn how to come to whatever you're doing from that place of service.
100%, man. I couldn't say that any better.
And the other thought I had on that was the integrity thing you mentioned. And so the purpose of this show for me has always been this we have this mismatched culture where, for whatever reason, entrepreneurs are always held up as a villain. And that's always really bothered me, because really entrepreneurs are not villains. I mean, certainly there are, in the realm of entrepreneurs, people who are, but entrepreneurship is far more often, it's people who are looking to give and to serve and to bring value. And I tell people all the time is like, hey, everything you touch in your life today was at some point handled by an entrepreneur, like literally all of it. Because if it exists, an entrepreneur made it.
Right. Yeah.
And so the one of the things that I think has just blown me away from doing this show as long as I've been doing it is how often I ask that question and the answer is integrity. Right. Like I could probably do a 5-minute montage of just different guests telling me their first thing that comes to their mind is integrity. Right. Or some form of it, integrity, honesty, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
It always solidifies for me, like that's the way it is. Right. Entrepreneurs are heroes, right? They're unsung heroes. And so anyways, I just wanted to point that out.
Yeah, no, and I appreciate you mentioning that because I didn't realize that that would be so high up on so many people's lists. But again, that's why you're doing the show, and I've heard you share that before, that you're doing this to really uncover like the true heart behind an entrepreneur, right? Like what we really are, and we ultimately we are servants of the world, like, and everything that we use at one point was created to serve people, like. Even Amazon, which now gets like a lot of hate from a lot of people. Like one of my brothers hates Amazon. He's like, I hate it. I'm like, do you use it? He's like, yeah, dude, it's super convenient. I'm like, they built that to help you. Like, I know you say you hate them. It's because they're huge, but it's because they did a really good job solving a problem. And they still do that, that customer obsession, right? That is what drives them. And I just think that it's great that what you're doing here. Like, I love this show because that reason. It reminds me that like I'm a hero. I'm not a villain, even though we sometimes get a bad rap. And I just think it's a few of us out there that maybe there's always a bad apple or two, right? But what you're doing here is adding a lot of value. And it's cool to hear that there's others on this show that are saying the same thing.
Yeah, it's super cool, and just it's one of those things that like you really understand, and like even with big businesses, like with Amazon's huge, but like they have trigger words. Like if I've got several clients that work on Amazon. I got one of my businesses that's on Amazon, and if we go in there and say, hey, like we're having this problem, and you need to fix it, then we don't get a response back. But if we say, hey, there's this problem and it's causing your customers to have this issue, can you help us fix it so your customers aren't having that issue anymore? We get responses really quick.
I'm sure.
Right?
That's smart, man. Good job.
Right. And it comes back to that same thing of like, they understand who they're here to serve. Right. And, they're here to, big businesses, small businesses, entrepreneurship at its core in a capitalist society, entrepreneurship is about serving others first.
Yeah.
So
100%, man. Like, no, I think I love that, man, that you just brought that all back together. And I think it's really smart the way that you've learned how to contact Amazon. It's all in the words you use, right?
It's all in the words, right? It comes back to learning, that's pretty much standing operating procedure for anyone is like learn how to figure out what it is that they want. And that's like you mentioned your superhero, right? Your skill is learning how to see what the other person wants out of life, what the problem 100%. Is, and learning how to speak to that. That's really, if you're listening to this, that's the secret of life, is learning how to see the other person's problems and then present whatever the solutions are in a way that they want that outcome. So
yeah, man, you just gave up the secret to life on the Hero Show. Richard Matthews, everybody, here he is. I want to give applause, but I know that comes out sounding terrible, so I'm not going to do it.
So that's basically a wrap on our interview, Alex. I do have one last thing I do on every show, and you've listened a few times, you probably know. It's called the Heroes Challenge, and I do this basically. It is a way for me to get access to stories I might not otherwise be able to find on my own through a service like PodMatch, because I'm looking for people who aren't out there, trying to tell their story. So the question is simple. Do you have someone in your life or in your network that you think has a cool entrepreneurial story? Who are they? First names are fine, and why do you think they should come share their story with us here on the Hero Show?
Yeah, one person immediately comes to mind when you ask the question. His name is Jared Gray Beal, and he has just come up through a lot of opposition throughout his life in his entrepreneurial journey, and he's very successful now and done extremely well. And I think that his mind is so much bigger than even what he's doing today. So I can't wait to see where he goes. But his journey is fascinating because a lot of us can relate to it, and the kind of the struggles along the way. When you hear them, it's like, ooh, I could see myself in that. So Jared Gray Beal will be the guy I'd recommend because I just think that I would love to hear that episode. Let's put it that way.
Awesome. We'll reach out afterwards and see if we can get him on the show with an introduction or something. So thank you for that. And in comic books, there's always the crowd at the end who are cheering on the acts of heroism and saying thank you to the hero for their work. So as we close our analogous to that, I want to find out where people can find you if they're interested in working with you. Where can they light up the bat signal, so to speak, and say, hey, you know what, I need your help, Alex. And more importantly, who are the right types of people to reach out and maybe be a good fit for your service?
Yeah. So, I mentioned being that solutions guy, right? Like I can find the problem and identify it and build something off of it. That's really what I'm good at. I'm a strategy guy through and through at the end of the day. And everything I do is at creatingabrand.com. That's the name of my podcast. Also my website. You can even find PodMatch through there, but you can also just book a 15-minute call with me. And I do that with a lot of people that are my listeners, just to kind of go over things. Or when people hear me on a podcast like yours, Richard, they'll kind of book the time, be like, hey, I had a question on something you're talking about. Can we kind of go over it a little bit more? So I love to add that value to people and help them out. So it's all at creatingabrand.com. With that said, I mean, what you're doing here with the Hero Show is awesome. Like I encourage the listeners to hang here and hang with what Richard's doing, because this is like a super good podcast and you're a great interviewer. I can tell that you've been on both sides of the mic. It definitely shows with your experience here. But thanks again for having me, man. I really appreciate it.
Awesome. Thank you for that. And do look forward to having you on in the future. So thank you very much again for coming on, Alex. Really appreciate your time as well. So any final words of wisdom before I hit this stop record button?
Yeah, I'll give one more thing. And this is something that I'd really love to tell the other entrepreneurs is to remember that you have greatness and creativity within yourself. You have greatness and creativity within yourself. I think sometimes we hear stories from entrepreneurs that have like changed the world or done some amazing feat or did the impossible, right? And we look at ourselves and say, I don't have whatever that is. But it's just not true. You have greatness and creativity within yourself. As created beings, we're all made to create. And we find that hero within us, that genius within us, and we begin pouring that out into the world, we are doing a service for others. So I want to encourage you once again that you've got this greatness, you have this creativity, and you can do something amazing that can change the world or at least somebody's life. And if it changes one life, I believe what we're doing is completely worth it.
Yeah, and the whole thing about being, I call it creativity, the ability to create, is a spark of divinity, right? Mm-hmm. And you mentioned being a created being, and the story in Genesis is that we were created from dust, and then God Himself breathed life into us. Yeah. Right. That's the spark of divinity that you're talking about there, and with that comes that ability to create, to be the kind of person who has greatness inside of you. And it's not something that's like you may not have figured it out yet or discovered it, but it's there.
It is. Yeah, it is, man. You're absolutely right. And I think that's the one thing I want listeners to really take away from this is that they've got something that only they can do, and it's their job to do it, right?
Absolutely. So again, thank you so much for coming on today, Alex. Really appreciate your time.
Yeah, Richard, I appreciate it, man. This was a blast.
Thank you.